How can we disable the default server and enable the different one? To disable the default server and enable a different one in Spring Boot, exclude the default server dependency in the form.xml and add a dependency for the desired server. For example, to switch from Tomcat to Jetty, exclude the Tomcat dependency and include the Jetty dependency in our project configurations. So now we will learn what are the annotations we found in our Spring Boot applications. So first one, that is the main one, is a Spring Boot application. This is one of the annotation that combines at configuration, at enable auto configuration and at component scan annotation with their default attributes. So now we can see what is at enable auto configuration. At enable auto configuration annotation in Spring Boot tells the framework to automatically configure our application based on the libraries we have included. This means Spring Boot can set up our project with the default setting that are most likely to work well for our setup. At configuration annotation in Spring marks a class as a source or a bean definition for the application context. It tells Spring that the class can be used to define and configure beans, which are managed components of a Spring application. It facilitates dependency injection and service orchestration. At component scan in Spring tells the framework where to look for components, services and configurations. It automatically discovers and registers beans in the specified package. It eliminates the need for manual bean registration and making it easier to manage and scale the application's architecture. The @bean annotation in Spring marks a method in a configuration class to define a bean. This bean is then managed by a Spring container which handles its lifecycle and dependencies. The @bean annotation is used to explicitly create and configure beans that should manage. @component. The @component annotation in Spring marks a class as a Spring managed component. This allows Spring to automatically detect and register the class as a bean in the application context. It enables dependency injection and making the class available for use throughout the application. @repository annotation in Spring marks a class as a data access component specifically for a database operations. It provides additional benefits like exception translation, making it easier to manage database access and integrate with Spring's data access framework. @service annotation in Spring marks a class as a service layer. It indicates that it holds business logic. It is used to create a Spring managed beans, making it easier to organize and manage services within the application. Here we can see there is a cross question in most of the interviews they have asked. Can we use @component instead of @repository and @service? If yes, then why do we use @repository and @service? Yes, we can use @component instead of @repository and @service since all three creates a Spring bean. However, @repository and @service make our code clearer by showing the purpose of each class. @repository also helps to manage database errors better. Using these specific annotations making our code easier to understand and maintain. @controller annotation in Spring marks a class as web controller that handles HTTP requests. It is used to define methods that respond to web requests, show web pages or return data, making it a key part of Spring's web application framework. @REST controller annotation in Spring marks a class as a RESTful web services. It combines @controller and @response body, meaning the method in the class automatically return JSON or XML responses, making it easy to create a REST APIs. Request mapping. The request mapping annotation in Spring maps HTTP requests to handle methods in the controller classes. It specifies URL path and the HTTP method, that is get, post, put, etc. that method should handle. Enable routing and processing of web requests in the application. @avoid annotation in Spring enables automatic dependency injection. It tells Spring to automatically find and inject the required bean into a class. It is reducing the need for manual wiring and simplifying the management of dependencies within the application. At path variable annotation in Spring extracts the value from URI templates and maps them with method parameters. It allows handlers to capture dynamic parts of the URL, making it possible to process and respond to requests with path specific data in the web applications. The at request param annotation in Spring binds a method with parameter to a web request parameter. It extracts query parameters, form data or any parameters in the request URL. It is allowing the handler method to process and use these values in the application. At response body annotation in Spring tells a controller method to directly return the method's result as a response body instead of rendering a view. This is commonly used for RESTful APIs to send data that is like JSON or XML format back to client. At request body annotation in Spring binds the body of a HTTP request to a method parameter. It converts the request body into Java object. It is enabling the handling of data sent in formats that is like JSON or XML in RESTful web services. At enable WebMVC annotation in Spring activates the default configurations for Spring MVC. It sets of essential components like view resolvers, message converters and handler mappings. It is providing a base configuration for web applications. At enable async. At enable async annotation in Spring enables asynchronous method execution. It allows method to run in the background on a separate thread. It is improving performance by freeing up the main thread for other tasks. At scheduled annotation in Spring triggers methods to run at fixed intervals or specific times. It enables scheduling tasks automatically based on cron expressions. It is fixed delays or fixed rates, facilitates automated and time execution of methods. At enable scheduling is an annotation in the Spring framework used to enable scheduling capabilities for methods within the Spring application. It allows methods annotated with @schedule to be executed based on the specific time intervals on cron expressions.